They better be coming up with a sequel for this game. They better than be. This game has such a great base of variety from gameplay perspective, as like Briar and Lute, that they could just enhance by adding more variety in the game. The encounters have to have more variety, the puzzles or platforming has to have more variety, just everything, basically. And now that they have set the fundamentals down for the mechanics, it's easier to add new stuff and variety. So the next game, this game is good, but it's not good enough to the point where I'm just content and excited to play it, you know? That's what this game is really missing. But the next game, when they add more variety and keep the quality pretty much the same, that would probably be an absolute blast to play. But they seriously have to understand as to what's wrong with the game loop in this game. Otherwise, I cannot see that really happening exactly. The game loop being like going from one big encounter that rates your performance based on like what combos you use and like how much damage you took and all that, and having it be like every time like a very like anxiety inducing, like suffocating long fight, and then you have a transformation or like transportation period where you just do some puzzle, not puzzles, like platforming, and then you go into one next big encounter and so, like that kind of like format gets very boring and feels very samey when you see literally every single area in the game. They for sure tested other ways of doing this also, because other games that they took inspiration from don't do this the same way this game does. So something or someone's in the studio, in the team, were like, you know, maybe this might be better than doing it more traditionally, and this was not the case. I very strongly disagree with this style on the gameplay loop. I very strongly hope that when they do make the sequel, they make it much more loose with the enemy encounters. Also, there doesn't have to be a cutscene every time when there happens something in the game, or you want the player to have some guidance on what is happening, you know? Like, there always is so many cutscenes in this game showing the player what's going on. Like, that doesn't really have to be there, you know? It's too... like, the cutscenes in this game are also another thing. There's too often, like, too long cutscenes in this game. Like, when example, you go into Rupture state, you go into Berserker state, you go into the Transcended state, or the finishers from all the stances. The animations that they have, or the cinematics that play, are cool, but they just last way too long amount of time. They are way too long, and they interrupt the gameplay flow a lot if you watch the whole thing every time, which is really bad for like player attention, basically, if you want players to be engaged with your game, when you have like so many like interrupting cutscenes for moments like that. So that's something that they need to also work on. Just make them shorter and make them appear like in the game. Like a good example of this would be from games I know, God of War 2018 or Ragnarok, like when you put Rage Form on, like the enemies just like get knocked up in the air and Kratos does this scream or yell, and then he turns into his Rage Form. This all happens in-game engine and there's no cutscene or anything. Just have it be like that, but just all of the other forms and actions in the screen. Just have it feel more fluid, the transformations between different attacks and forms like that, you know? Very important to get right as well. But I cannot emphasize more that the gameplay loop has to have, it just has to feel more fluid and more natural when you're moving throughout areas in this game, where it's so much so should not feel like when you go into one encounter and then, you know, after the encounter is done, after the long and arduous fight is done, that you have beaten it, then you know basically that there's only some platforming and looting after that for like couple minutes. Like, you know exactly what to expect, and this game with its gameplay loop never surprises you with what your expectation is. It never goes against that, really. So it feels very samey and very monotonous after a while when you see that kind of format just continue on and on, you know? So they have to change that. Like, that's like a number one thing that they have to change with how they, if they want to make this game feel better to play all the time. Just want to make the feeling of playing this game feel like be more organic, rather than be more like so set in stone kind of like arcade or like level based, you know? Another game I could also reference in this exact same thing would be something like Armored Core 6 that I also played. Like, Armored Core 6 is also chapter or level based, but inside those chapters or levels, how are the encounters designed? Well, most of the time the encounters are designed by where you are progressing currently and what you can see on your screen. There's just different amount of enemies and different enemies all the time everywhere in the levels. Nothing forces you to kill always the same amount of enemies and all the enemies in the level. You can do it if you want, but most of the time you don't even have to if you don't want. And killing the enemies and progressing the levels feels a lot more organic, because there's no there's no abundance of cinematics in those areas that interrupt gameplay. There's no amount of like in-game cinematics between like different forms or special attacks or something that interrupt the gameplay flow. There's nothing takes you off the gameplay flow when there's parts in the areas or in the missions where you just travel and between the areas where you fight enemies. Because how does From Software deal with that in Armored Core 6? Well, they put a few amount of enemies that are usually pretty easy to kill and sets the player at ease and lets the player explore their capabilities of what kind of combos and attacks they have. By having the transformation periods between smaller amounts of enemies into the bigger encounters be a lot more like soothing and like calming to the player, like almost like calming their senses, so to speak, after like big encounters, right? And then when you go into a bigger encounter, you're not gonna feel rusty because you still kill some enemies here and there, so you're always gonna be like fired up, ready, and like excited to like take on another encounter. While in this game, the disparity or the dichotomy between the transformation periods and the encounter periods, it's so strong that you always feel like you're always like a little out of touch when the next encounter comes. So you're always like somewhat like nervous whenever a new encounter comes, you know, rather than being excited to do it exactly, you know? That's how I feel when I play this game, at least. Like, I'm not excited for new encounters. I feel like I'm dreading almost new encounters every time when I know that there's gonna be a new fight encounter that's gonna take like 5 minutes to kill like every enemy in it, and if I don't kill them like somewhat what is the word, like efficiently, and use like all of my like most meta and highest damaging tools that I have possible, then it's gonna take way too long to defeat the encounter, and I feel more inclined to not test out new mechanics or combos, but only keep the combos that I'm already like using and comfortable using, rather than exploring what I'm able to do and what I'm not able to do, if that makes sense. So it's very important that the next game they make, the sequel to this game, they will have to touch on that gameplay loop very strongly, because it cannot stay the same it is right now if they want the player to have more retention towards the game and have a more pleasant experience to playing it all the time. But yeah, I think now the credit cutscene is gonna play, so I'm gonna stop talking about this stuff now. Watch this again. That's Corvo, who is actually gonna die this time.
Corvo, what are you doing here? I thought I'd never see you again. The torchbearer led you back to me at a most convenient time. I have a very important message for you to deliver. There you go now. To Rhyme.
You know, I don't understand this part. I guess Cordelia has a scythe where the blade detaches from the handle. That's what that must be. She threw like a boomerang at it. Or just, yeah, well, never mind. That explains it.
How unfortunate. I took it for a corrupted creature, and my instinct got the best of me. After all, who could roam these ruins, if not one that carries their taint? You must have a good reason to be here, alive.
Cordelia? Cordelia the Reaper? I'm sorry, milady, but the chimeras that came before you, they're no more. I'm afraid you're too late.
Or maybe I was right on time. What lies did you write in that letter? Where are they?
Don't be so reckless, my sweet Reaper. Once the torchbearer takes them, the dead can only tell us so much. I will have a friendly conversation with our devoted observer. Well, you give chase to Beriah and Lute.
They won't stand a chance, Your Grace.
Approach them with that attitude, and you'll face the judge in no time. It's not time.
That's actually a hint to where the next game takes place.
Follow
It's probably
them.
Rhyme,
Learn
because
what
Rhyme is
they're
the
capable
city
of.
dedicated to judge. From the Three Keepers.
Then report back to me.
As Your Grace commands.
So, Leighton, I assume your letter was addressed to me. Speak then. What did you wish to tell the Grand Master of the Ashen Blade? You know that you were meant to die here, with all the others. Did you expect that I would fall for any of your pretentious tales?
Let us speak the truth for once, then. They stopped you, Dougal. Admit it. The outcasts did what no one believed possible, including me.
Those peasants did exceed my expectations, yes. But all they have accomplished is just a small setback. A detour from a path that cannot be abandoned.
But why? What did you hope to accomplish here?
You would not understand, or anyone else in your sanctimonious triarchy. But you do not need to. It suffices that you recite your beloved canticle. The three cities still stand to this day, for the glory of the Keepers.
Are those tears of Adoran and Rhyme? Dougal, you madman! What have you done?
The Soulstice of Souls is upon us.
Look how close the other cities are. Like, they are not even that far from Ilden. Transcended. It's teasing me there, but I'm not doing it. If I don't feel, I've already explained this, but if I don't feel like content and excited when I play this game, I should not play it, right? And I don't feel like that. I feel like the sequel for this game has insanely good potential. Just hope that the devs actually are able to make the sequel for this game. Because, like, depending how much money they put on this game and how little they got in return because the game was not very popular at all. Like, basically nobody heard of this game. It is on, you know, PS5 and, like, Xbox, you know, Series X and S, I'm pretty sure, also, as well as PC Steam, you know? So maybe they did get enough funding that they are still making the sequel. I would hope so, because with how much teasing they did in this game, it basically means that they were already designing the sequel when they were making this game, with how confident they were that they were gonna make the sequel for the game. So I would already expect that they were designing the game at the same time while they're designing this game, or the later parts of this game. Well, they have probably been designing the sequel for this game for the last like 1.5 years when this game was released. Well, almost 2 full years now. I think this game was released in like the September or October of 2022, so we are basically almost 2 years now. So they have been designing it for a while, and I still hope that they are gonna be able to fire the game up. I very strongly hope so, because the sequel for this game, with the fundamentals that there is so far, with Brian and Lute being in the state that they are, like in the unstable, like transcendent state, as well as with the Berserker mode, with the Rupture mode, with the base combat of the game, with all of the weapons that we have that they introduce probably new. They can probably rework and change some of the combo mechanics in this game that feel more like there's more variety with what you do with each weapon, rather than keep the button presses pretty much the same, which makes like muscle memory easier, but like it also makes like the expression of what you can have on the attacks like feel more constrained as well. Because when you press like a certain combination of buttons on a weapon, you expect like a certain type of attack. Example, like you can do like the plunging down attacks or the plunging up attacks, the uppercut attacks. Those are always like an X and R2 and whatnot. So if they put more variety on like the attacks, then you can have like more different like skill gap expression with different weapons by having those attacks do something different. So all weapons are not capable of doing like the same type of things, and the weapons are more gonna be like more unique and not and less like different flashy stat sticks that you have for fighting certain different enemies that you keep switching over. You know, there's many ideas that they can explore there, but the borderline is that they have to make better is the gameplay loop and add more variety to the gameplay loop itself. Those are the 2 things that they have to work on the most. As I am waiting for that, this is likely gonna be my last stream of Soulstice until the sequel comes, so can't wait to play that sequel, but before that, it is goodbye for now. Briar and Lute.